Before we begin, a heads up. This audio documentary shares personal stories and perspectives about alleged spiritual and sexual abuse. Some content is mature and may be graphic. Listener discretion is advised. If you feel overwhelmed while listening, please pause and seek support from a trusted friend or professional. Parents and guardians, please preview before sharing with minors.
When I returned from Italy, I asked the sisters if I could have a meeting with them. And I told them that ahead of time that I thought that how I had been treated was spiritually abusive. And I made clear I didn't think it was intentional, but I felt like I had an obligation to say that, not just for myself, but for future sisters who might be treated in the way that I had been treated. So I knew it was going to be really hard for them to receive that.
Yeah, I remember that moment. I could feel your sadness and also this peaceful resolve that you had. And I really wonder, even now, did you know then what you were hoping for from those conversations?
I think part of me was really hoping that my concerns would be heard, so that I could stay because I loved my community and I really believed in the mission. But I also think deep down I knew that something else was happening, and I went into the conversation knowing that walking out of it I would know what I needed to do.
I just felt like something precious was slipping out of reach. But even in the ache of all of that, there was this profound peace. I think maybe that's kind of what you're talking about, and you're knowing, even under the surface. And I was still praying, though, on my flight home to Michigan, like praying hope against hope that there'd be some kind of miracle, that your conversation would maybe open up something.
Yeah, I really hoped that too. And the sisters received me very lovingly and listened to my concerns, but I could tell that they didn't receive them and they didn't agree with me. And so at the end, I just said that this isn't just about me, it's about my concerns for future generations, and I didn't feel like their response was enough. But I told them that I really loved them, and we hugged. And as I left that room, I think I knew that I was going to be leaving.
When you told me how the sisters responded to your concerns, I heard a lot of the same echoes of conversations I tried to have, and the love I also felt, and how one conclusion was really kind of arising out of their response to you was like a response to me. It gave me answers to my own questions, really, that felt unanswered in those other meetings.
Hi everyone, this is Sister Theresa Aletheia. I'll be narrating this episode. A few years ago, Sister Danielle Victoria and I did something brave, or something reckless, depending on who's listening. We both left the convent and began the long process of beginning a new religious community of nuns, or more technically accurate, religious sisters. We each had entered the convent more than a decade ago, but we felt God calling us to something else, to a new mission, to people on the fringes of the church, especially those wounded, abused, or scandalized by members of the church. But for us, this mission wasn't abstract, it was personal. Just after we started our new community, Sister Danielle and I decided that before we began this mission, we needed to tell our own stories of abuse to protect anyone who could be harmed. In 2024, we came forward publicly to share our experiences of spiritual abuse at the hands of a trusted priest. This audio documentary delves more into our stories and the nuances and complexity of adult abuse in spiritual settings. This podcast isn't about breaking our silence. We've already shared our story publicly. It's about breaking open how spiritual abuse happens, why it so often goes unnoticed or unaddressed, and how we can begin to build communities that are more honest, more human, and more hopeful. Each of us has a role to play in this work of repair. We invite you to join us in this difficult but essential work. This audio documentary is the first major step in the mission of the Sisters of the Little Way of Beauty, Truth, and Goodness, a mission of listening and solidarity with people on the fringes of the Church, especially those who have been wounded, abused, or scandalized by members of the Church. If you would like to support our mission and projects like this, please visit sistersofthelittleWay.com. In this episode, we're doing something a little different. Up until now, Sister Danielle and I have taken turns sharing our stories. But this is the moment our paths truly converge. So in this episode, I'll be narrating, but you'll hear both of our voices, because this part of the journey is where we realize that our stories are being brought together in a surprising and somewhat terrifying way. Let's set the stage. It's spring of 2022, 5 years after the events with Father Dave. I have just returned from Italy. A lot has shifted. We have both grown, healed, and come to new depths of understanding. But some things still remain unresolved. Most notably, we were still waiting for a response from the Vatican on the second case we submitted in 2020. And while that silence lingered, another story was unfolding. Sister Danielle and I had both found ourselves voicing concerns within our community. We weren't trying to stir controversy. We weren't trying to break away. We were speaking out because we cared. This episode takes us into that turning point when we each had to make a decision that would change the course of our lives. What do you do when truth-telling threatens to cost you everything? What do you do when love for your community and loyalty to your conscience collide? What was God asking of us in that moment? And what would happen if we had the courage to say yes? Step into the moment that ended a journey that we had expected would only end in death. Our journey with a community of sisters we loved more than anything. Walk with us as we step into the unknown and discover that God was lighting a new way. Welcome to Descent into Light.
Right around the same time that you were solidifying your decision, I was realizing that I just would not be able to continue. And it was such a heartbreaking realization. But I also knew that God was speaking to me through what I was experiencing. And so though I knew I couldn't continue in this community, it didn't feel like an end somehow.
Yeah, in it all, I just felt God's love. I entered the convent because I felt called by God's love, and I left it because I felt called by His love. So even though it was really clear to me what God was asking, I wanted to make this decision out of peace and from a real deep place. So I made a retreat in Italy before I left, and then when I came back, I made another retreat just to make sure that I was making this the right decision, and a decision that was rooted in God's love for me.
That last retreat before beginning this is really brought it all to the Lord in that final retreat. I was grateful that my spiritual director had walked with me since my second year in the convent, so he knew me really well, and he was able to confirm that the things that I had been discerning were there since the beginning. But I no longer depended on it in the way that I did with Father Dave. And that was really significant. A new freedom and a peace had taken root.
After I came out of my retreat, I was really certain that God was asking me to leave. But I still didn't say anything to my superiors. I know why I was procrastinating. I was scared, and I didn't want to leave on a deep level. Like, I loved my community. But one day I was praying, and I just felt God gently say, I've told you what I want you to do. So I just was like, yeah, you're right, you have. And so after that, I went home and I let my superiors know.
I was in the mother house at that time, so I spoke one-on-one with all the sisters that I was closest to. It just felt like breaking up with a large number of people that you love, your favorite people in the whole world. It was heartbreaking, even though I had a deep sense of peace.
Sister Danielle and I have come to believe something profound through the hardest experiences of our lives, that one of the most powerful ways God shows his love is by descending into the darkest, most difficult places with us. He doesn't wait at the finish line for us. He enters the pain. He sits with us in the confusion, the betrayal, the heartbreak. And then slowly, quietly, he begins to lift us. He sees the unique person that each of us is. He sees the specificity of our pain. He helps us rise just enough to catch a breath, just enough to see that we're not alone. Healing doesn't come instantaneously, perfectly, or in programmatic ways. It's messy. It's slow. It's personal. It's holy. It's not about putting on a happy face or pretending everything is fine. It's about walking through the pain with our limitations and learning to live with them. But God still works miracles. At least that's what we've experienced. After the betrayal of Father Dave's behavior, we suffered. But what followed was even more painful. At first, we thought our suffering was the result of failure, our own and others. But over time, we began to understand something deeper. Our departure wasn't just about others' inability to validate our experience or look at the deeper changes that were necessary to address what had happened. It was about something more mysterious. We could see that God was showing us a different pattern, another way, beyond blame and scapegoating. God was doing something new. These realities are hard to explain. People want clean answers. See, you suffered for a reason. But abuse is never justified just because good eventually comes from it. That's not who God is. He doesn't orchestrate our pain to produce something useful. He doesn't need to. He's not a manipulator. He's goodness itself. So when evil does rush into our lives, his goodness rushes in too. Not to excuse it, but to redeem it. In this episode, we enter that stage of grief where the fog begins to lift and something new begins to rise. The sixth stage of grief, known as the upward turn, can happen alongside other stages. It marks a transition in a person toward acceptance of what has happened. In this stage, a person shifts from feeling overwhelmed and in denial to gradually finding ways to cope with what they have lost and to live with it. In our upward turn, Sister Danielle and I began to both see something new, a little way opening up before us. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't easy, but it was real. Join us as we follow the mysterious movement of grace in the aftermath of suffering, the place where the story doesn't end, but begins again. This is Descent into Light. Welcome to Episode 6, Forging a Little Way.
So what was the weirdest thing you can think about going back out into the world for you?
The weirdest thing is I got a credit card and I checked my credit and it was literally 0. Like I had perfect credit. I mean, you know me. Like I had perfect credit. So I almost had a heart attack when I looked and saw a 0. Like I didn't even know that was possible. It was like I didn't exist. What about for you?
You know, this is going to sound so superficial, but honestly, once I took that veil off, it was like I didn't know what to do with my hair.
I know, even just wearing clothes.
It was such a burden to have to think about what to wear, honestly. And like I had my nieces, my teenage nieces, helping me like reintroducing me to mousse for my curly hair. They were like, "Your hair's dead, Aunt Danielle."
I know, before I walked out the door in normal clothes, I would say to my sisters, "Do I look like a normal person?" And sometimes they'd be like, "No." While Sister Danielle and I were figuring out really practical realities like how to build our credit and style our hair after leaving the convent, we were also praying with what we felt the Holy Spirit calling us into. We felt in prayer that we were called to a new mission focused on people on the margins of the church, especially those who had been wounded, abused, or scandalized by members of the church. At first, this was a terrifying prospect. No other community of religious sisters in the church is focused on preventing abuse in the church. And we could see why. We were focusing on a huge issue, so immense and overwhelming that we constantly just said to one another, "Is this really possible? Can we do this?" We felt like what God was asking of us was, well, a bit too much. Then we began to realize we weren't alone. The same spirit that had been stirring in our hearts was stirring in the hearts of others across the church. And this reality has been one of the most unexpected sources of hope in this journey. When people don't understand what we're doing, and that happens often, God sends someone else, someone who does understand, someone walking a parallel path, people who see what we see, people who have dedicated time, tears, and treasure to supporting survivors of abuse in the church, people who are choosing to do this work and remain in the church, not out of denial or comfort, but out of deep conviction. We reach out to one of these people at the beginning of our journey, Father Hans Zollner, one of the world's leading experts on safeguarding and prevention of sexual abuse.
My name is Hans Zollner. I'm a German Jesuit from the center of Bavaria in Regensburg. I have been studying theology and philosophy in Innsbruck, Regensburg, and Rome, as well as psychology and psychotherapy. I hold a doctorate in theology, systematic theology, a licentiate in psychology, and I'm a licensed psychotherapist. When Pope Francis called me in 2018 and asked me to organize the summit.
Yes, you heard that right. Father Zollner gets the occasional call from the Pope. He's spent most of his career working to prevent sexual abuse in the church and is widely regarded as one of the leading global experts of safeguarding. Sister Danielle and I first reached out to him because we were moved by how he handled his resignation from the Pontifical Commission for the Protection of Minors, a body that Pope Francis created in 2014 to advise on safeguarding. Father Zollner had been part of the commission from the beginning, but in 2023 he stepped down, citing serious concerns regarding responsibility, compliance, accountability, and transparency. He made those concerns public in an open letter. We admired the integrity it took to hand in his resignation to Pope Francis and to speak out about his concerns. Father Zollner travels frequently, training Catholic leaders all over the world in safeguarding. He also is the head of the Institute of Anthropology, Interdisciplinary Studies on Human Dignity and Care, or IADC, at the Pontifical Gregorian University in Rome, which trains students from all over the world in safeguarding and abuse prevention. So anyway, my point here is that Father Zollner is a busy man. But to our surprise, when we wrote to him to ask if he could meet us, he agreed to meet. Not only that, he encouraged us to attend his institute in Rome and to continue in the work we were feeling called to do.
I think for a variety of reasons, also some understandable reasons, men, and especially priests and religious men, shy away from this topic because they are highly over-identified with sexual violence. So there is, in my experience, there is a greater awareness and a greater willingness by women and by religious women to deal with this issue. And actually, you are also an example in this, because I've never been asked by any male religious, for example, to do a podcast like this. This is not to say that there are, again, that all the religious men run away from this. That's not the case. But female sensitivity and maybe also the courage to face this difficult mix up of violence and sexuality, plus the female religious role that has always been the hallmark of religious life within the church as a charismatic, very down-to-earth reality in contact with very difficult situations of poverty, of injustice. The closeness of a female, may I say, a maternal presence to many people in this world has been exemplary. And I can only say that I have highest regards for many of religious women who have been accompaniers of many situations of violence. This is not to say that there are not specific challenges for female religious life, also in terms of the abuse that we have become growingly aware of that is going on in religious communities. The abuse of spiritual means and instruments and power, the sometimes emotional, psychological, and even sexual abuse that is going on in religious community of female participation. So it is not that there are not specific challenges, but I think there is also a particular charism and a particular importance of religious women because of, let me say it bluntly, of the bigger awareness of and sensitivity and a stronger courage of women to really remain in the deepest challenges, hurt, and difficulties of human life, of human existence.
You might be wondering at this point, how does one go about beginning a community of religious sisters? You may not have even been aware that there are different groups of nuns or religious sisters. Maybe you have seen that we often wear different habits or symbols that identify a particular community. Different communities of sisters do different things. Religious communities rise up in particular moments in history to address particular needs. Some work in hospitals, others teach, some serve the poor. What sets them apart is something we call a charism in the Catholic Church. A charism is a unique grace given to founders of particular communities by the Holy Spirit that are meant to build up the body of Christ. And there are thousands of these communities around the world, each with our own mission, rhythm of life, and spirituality. So if a woman is interested in becoming a nun or religious sister, she has hundreds, if not thousands of communities to choose from. But starting a new religious community of sisters, that's something else entirely. It begins with a call, a deep interior sense that God is asking the founder or founders of a community to live out a new charism, to do something different from what other groups of sisters are already doing. From there, the group starts small, as a private association. They ask a bishop for permission to live in his diocese and to begin their mission. The bishop decides whether they can wear habits, be called sister, and publicly live as religious sisters. This gets into the weeds a bit, but it used to be the case that bishops could take the next step and declare the group a public association, a more official recognition in the church. But in 2022, that changed. Pope Francis made it so only the Vatican could approve that next step. The goal was to protect the church, especially from abuse and dysfunction in new communities. It was a good and necessary change, but it made an already fragile process even more uncertain. And here's the thing most people don't know. Most new communities don't make it. They dissolve, fade away, never move on to the next step to become an official institute in the church. So when Sister Danielle and I left the convent, we weren't just making a simple career change. We were risking the very possibility of living as religious sisters, of living the life we'd been called to for years. Everything felt fragile. There were no guarantees. But still, we believed God was asking us to take this risk.
Our mission touches on really sensitive things, including liability and money, so we didn't know if we'd be able to find a bishop willing to take that risk.
What we were doing felt really impossible. I mean, honestly, at times throughout this whole process, I've questioned my sanity.
I think we've done that together. You can't do this and not feel your total inadequacy.
And we didn't even know the basics of what was involved in starting a new community. I didn't pay attention to that stuff at all. I had no idea.
No, I never looked into it because I knew I was never going to do it.
How do you describe what it feels like to make a leap like this? Both Sister Danielle and I were entering our 40s when we left the convent. We had given some of the best years of our lives to God and to our community. And suddenly, we were stepping into the unknown with no guarantees, no safety net, and no clear path ahead. It felt like jumping out of a plane without knowing if the parachute was packed right. The only word for it is terrifying. We had almost nothing, very little money, few resources, no religious habit. We couldn't call ourselves sisters. We had no community, no health insurance, no bank accounts, not even a car. Everything familiar was gone. In the middle of that kind of instability, it meant more than we can say to talk to someone like Father Zollner, someone who got it, who spoke the strange new language we had learned through the most painful moments of our lives. A language shaped by grief, by truth, by the kind of wisdom that only comes from walking through fire or standing beside those who have. Sarah Larson is another person like that. In 2018, she felt called to respond more directly to abuse in the church. That call became Awake, a nonprofit that walks with survivors, concerned Catholics, and allies.
My name is Sarah Larson. I am a wife, a mother of 2 young adult children, a lifelong Catholic, and I am the executive director of Awake, which is a community of abuse survivors, concerned Catholics, and allies responding to the wounds of sexual abuse in the Catholic Church. For me personally, coming face to face with the darkness in the church that I love so much was just really hard. It shook me up in a very deep way and caused me to ask really hard questions about my faith, about my church, not so much for me about God. That was not shaken for me, but the question of how can I be part of this church that has done so much harm? How can I be a person of integrity in this institution was really deep for me. And so it was some pretty deep wrestling in those early months, especially when I was doing that wrestling alone. I've also found that when you create or enter into spaces where you are able to talk with other people who are wrestling with the same things, it's just so much less scary because you're not alone in that. And you can see that it's something that we can work through and deal with together in community in the body of Christ. That no matter how dark that hole is that these realities are, and believe me, every year I learn more that's just devastating and horrifying. And there is always light, and also God is with us in the darkness. I guess that's maybe for me, the reality that I've experienced most deeply is trying to not be afraid of the dark because we know that God enters into that space with us. And that's been just a huge consolation to me to recognize that there are other folks here in the darkness alongside one another.
Talking to people like Sarah Larson and Father Zollner reminded us that we're not alone, that others care about what we care about, that somewhere out there, others are trying to build something better too. We can do something together, and the risk is worth it. Yes, survivors are essential. Our insight is irreplaceable. We notice danger others miss. We carry a hard-won wisdom the church desperately needs. But too often when we speak, we're dismissed. We're called bitter, angry, or unstable. In truth, we're just naming what others refuse to see. We sound that alarm again and again. But if the church is serious about preventing abuse, it can't place the burden solely on survivors. We need people like Father Hans Zollner and Sarah Larson, people who step into this work not because they've suffered in specific ways, but because they care. People who choose to listen, learn, and lead change. If you're still listening, you might be one of these people. Listening to survivors voluntarily isn't easy. It's heavy, it's disorienting, it tests your faith. Most people look away. But if you step in, even in the darkness, light can be found. Our mission as Sisters of the Little Way is a call to the church to respond to people who have been exploited and abused by clergy and other church leaders. It's a call to listen and to stand in solidarity with those on the fringes of the church, especially those who have been wounded, abused, or scandalized by her own members. But this mission doesn't belong to us alone. It belongs to anyone who refuses to look away. Will you be one of them? Join us at sistersofthelittleWay.com.
What I've learned listening to so many survivors is that for many of them, it is not the initial act of abuse that is the deepest wound, but it is for many, not all of them, the ongoing sense of betrayal by the church in so many ways over so many years. I think it's really important when we talk about this issue that we speak in ways that help people recognize that there's still an ongoing problem, that this isn't a question of abuse that's in the past that we fixed and now maybe we just need to work for healing. No, there's still abuse happening today, and there's still betrayal happening today, and we are not dealing with a momentary crisis. We're talking about really an ongoing systemic issue. I know from my own experience how scary it can be to start facing these realities and really looking at this ugliness and darkness in the church, especially if you love the church deeply and you want to stay. And I've had people say to me, I've been afraid to look at this because I don't know if I'll be able to handle it. I don't know if there's anything I can do. But I'm probably on the most deep level, I think sometimes we have to have the humility to recognize our faith can be kind of shaky at times for various reasons. And so it can be scary to dive into something that we feel might cause us to question that or might shake our faith.
I mean, it was not even very much longer after leaving the convent that we did find a bishop. And that felt miraculous, really.
We found a bishop in the Pacific Northwest, which is where we really felt called to go because there's a lot of people there who are unaffiliated and away from the church or just not practicing at all. And we really felt like those were our people.
I mean, when I think back at that time, we were really just burning so deep with a sense of this call that we were not afraid, but also, we were afraid.
Yeah.
But we were afraid of everything before us, like the great unknown. But we were not afraid to admit how little we were.
In the midst of feeling a bit of unease, when we first went to our first diocese, meeting other people that were doing this kind of work really bolstered me.
God told us that He would show us who the little people of God are along the way, the people who would know what our mission is and who it was we were called to serve with. It takes a whole paradigm shift, really, and ultimately putting survivors first, looking at the most vulnerable first, really demands a martyrdom. It's total. There's nothing in between. There needs to be a willingness to die.
Early in our journey, an unexpected ally reached out. A journalist who had investigated spiritual abuse in the Buddhist community. Different religion, same patterns. When we spoke, it felt like he was speaking our language. Then he asked a question that still echoes in my mind. As religious sisters, is there a risk you'll become nursemaids to abusers, cleaning up messes while giving the church a good face? It was a hard question, but it was the right one. What he meant was, will you actually confront the roots of the problem or just polish the surface? Will your presence be used to make the church look better while the real issues stay untouched? We understood his concern. Dorothy Day, founder of the Catholic Worker Movement, didn't just feed the poor, she asked why poverty existed. She challenged the systems that created it, because she knew sin isn't just personal, it's structural. And she wasn't alone. Pope St. John Paul II called these deeper patterns structures of sin, the invisible forces formed by countless individual acts of injustice. If you take one thing from this podcast, let it be this. Abuse doesn't happen because of bad people. Certainly, when people choose to act abusively, they're responsible for their actions. But abuse is not isolated to individuals and their bad choices. It grows in broken communities, cultures, and systems. And if we're not willing to examine how abuse happens honestly, then we'll keep repeating the same patterns. We need to lower the threshold and lessen the stigma around abuse so that we can begin to effectively confront the very real ways our communities contribute to and are complicit in the reality of abuse. Father Zollner has been working in the heart of the Vatican for many years and studying this issue for much of his career. Shares why building a culture of accountability, compliance, and transparency in the church can be difficult. Difficult, but not impossible.
When Pope Francis called me in 2018 and asked me to organize the summit, it was clear to us, the organizing committee, that we could not possibly focus only on single cases of abuse and single cases of coverable abuse by bishops, provincials, and others. But we needed to get to the bottom issue. We needed to realize that this is not a single case issue. This is something that you can see in many dioceses for many decades, repeatedly, happening over and over again with the same type of behavior, the same type of language, the same type of consequences or lack of consequences. And from one country to another, from one continent to another. So how can this be? Apart from ethical and spiritual and pastoral questions, the question is, what are the organizational, what are the administrative failings within the church, within sociology? You call this a systemic failure. And one important thing is we don't talk about systematic failure. There are also systematic failures, which means that systematically there are things that don't work. But if you talk about a systemic failure, you talk about the institution as such that gives the framework that within that framework, it is set up for failure. And you don't do what you're supposed to do because of certain inbuilt failures. For example, accountability. Within the Catholic Church, it is almost impossible to find out who is responsible and accountable for certain failures and failings within a certain process, like reporting. I could give you many examples where it is almost impossible to find out who was responsible for what when it came to reporting a perpetrator, punishing, to supervising, and to ultimately also to help somebody to own his own responsibility, because we have such a complex and complicated structure. And apart from shying away from taking personal responsibility, is very easy, because within the church, it is not easy to pin down who has to bear the responsibility for a certain behavior or lack of behavior. Despite the fact that many people believe the Catholic Church to be a monolithic block of law and order and of authoritative top-down lines of command, I mean, the closer you get and the closer you experience the actual functioning of the church, the less you understand where the real leverages of power are and where and how responsibility is ultimately defined. Or to say that within the Catholic Church, we lack the culture of accountability. We don't take easily responsibility, personal and institutional responsibility. When it comes to compliance, how do we as church personnel, priests, religious, how do church leaders comply with the church norms themselves? And we had to realize that the church law, was not really complied with by church leaders. They were not reporting to cases of abuse to the appropriate authoritative roles and responsibilities. They were not reporting abuse to the Holy See, for example. That was why Pope Benedict, when he was prefect of the Congregation for Doctrine, centralized the whole reporting processes within the Catholic Church under his auspices, under the Congregation for Doctrine, as it is as of now. When we talk about sexual violence against children, everything has to be reported. And he only, in 2001, got the power to really concentrate everything, and which gave him the possibility to really follow up personally, which he did as a prefect and then later on as Pope Benedict from 2005 on when he was elected, which was a major step forward. Until 2001, 2002, there was no real consistency and no way to really look into the handling of cases by bishops and religious superiors.
Let's stop here. According to the historian Mark Knoll, the Catholic Church is the world's oldest continuously functioning international institution. Catholics make up more than half of the Christians in the world, with almost 1.5 billion members, present in almost every country in the world. If we imagine how large, sprawling, and unmanageable the United States government is, well, multiply that by a lot more when you think of the Catholic Church. Let's be clear, this context is not to excuse abuse. But Father Zollner is saying that determining who is accountable for abuse in the Catholic Church can be difficult to pinpoint because it's not always clear who is responsible. And in such a large international organization, very important issues can fall through the cracks. In fact, as Father Zollner pointed out, it was only in 2001 when Pope Benedict, who was a cardinal at the time, was able to centralize abuse reports to come to one place in the Vatican. Before that, many bishops didn't even forward abuse reports to the Vatican. In retrospect, it's difficult to believe that the Vatican was not requiring that cases as egregious as child abuse be sent to them before 2001. But that was indeed the case. While awareness around child abuse has been growing for many years, awareness around adult abuse, especially within unequal power dynamics, is relatively nascent. Father Zollner explains more.
So only from 2017 with the Me Too movement, the attention at the broader level and at, let me say, a public media level, outside court cases and outside scandalous news, was given to the reality of abuse of adult persons, in this case, mainly adult women. And that, together with other news, brought about also in the Catholic Church some type of attention for the reality and for the harm done to adult people who are abused by clergy and non-clergy in the Catholic Church. So this is relatively new. While we have been talking about child sexual abuse for about more than 40 years now, it is not even 10 years that this issue has come about as a major concern. Pope Francis, in one of his in-flight press conferences, mentioned the reality of abuse of adult women religious who were, he spoke about the abuse committed against them by clergy, and that set off another round of interest and research within the church with regard to this type of abuse against this type of persons. Before that, there were in the year 2000, 2001, there were some news about it. In the meantime, the attention had been growing, obviously, because also in Rome, in the Holy See offices, there was much more cases that were reported of abuse against women religious, but only with that parallel process of the Me Too movement and the Pope speaking about it from 2019. This has become of major interest.
As Father Zollner just explained, the Me Too movement in 2017 sparked a cultural reckoning, forcing society to confront sexual violence and consent with a new level of nuance and urgency.
The Me Too movement, it is growing, inspiring millions of women to share their personal stories of sexual harassment.
An estimated 33 million American women have been sexually harassed.
Just a year later, the Catholic Church is rocked by its own scandal, the exposure of Cardinal Theodore McCarrick, who had abused both minors and adult seminarians.
So we are seeing widespread reaction to the release of the McCarrick report.
Details about alleged sexual misconduct by a Catholic cardinal who was a power broker within the church.
These back-to-back moments brought long overdue attention to the reality of power, consent, and adult abuse, both in the wider world and within the church. And the truth is, this level of awareness is still relatively new. That's not an excuse. Mishandling adult abuse is always wrong, just as mishandling child abuse is always wrong. But public understanding also evolves, and with it, the chance to do better. Unlike with child abuse, where the church's failures have been long and painfully exposed, adult abuse is an area where the church still has a chance to lead, to be proactive, to educate, to prevent, if we choose to take up that responsibility. When we arrived in our new diocese, it felt strange to tell people our mission. It still feels strange. I think it makes a lot of people uncomfortable.
Yeah. One priest said, maybe someday we'll not need our community anymore. I'm sure he meant well, but that's just really not a realistic way to look at abuse.
I think that's the reason why people still continue to be scandalized by abuse cases. We like to think that we can kind of push it into the past. But abuse is always going to be in the church.
Yeah, but the idea that abuse can be completely eliminated isn't hope. It's just not true. Danger is always with us, and because sin is always with us.
Human life is always unsafe. Human life, from the beginning to the end, is unsafe. Realizing that as human beings, our life can end today because of an accident, because of whatever can happen to disease or is one of the hallmarks of an existence that knows that it is really not in our hand. That most of what we are and who we are and what is around us is not under our control. And the same is true for any protection against violence. And safeguarding as such is always an attempt to do what is within our reach so that we and others can be as safe as possible. But this is never, ever absolute and perfect. And this is one of the things that make me wonder also about the American society and the American way of approaching safety and safeguard. When I started to really delve into, for example, the measures that you have in institutions like Catholic universities, I remember that I was consulting the websites of Catholic universities on safeguarding measures, protection measure, and you have everything what a safeguarder can dream of. You have offices, you have websites, you have whistleblower lines, you have brochures, you have treatment centers, and whatever you have. In most parts of the world, there are no resources for that. There is no financial and personnel resource that would ever cover what you have. Still, people think that by introducing all this and making it as tight as possible, you will stop abuse. But human beings cannot stop abuse once and for all. This is a very dangerous illusion. Unfortunately, human beings have been abusing each other since the beginning. I mean, the Bible speaks about it in the story of Cain and Abel. But we have also stories from the cave drawings, paintings in France from about 50,000 years back, where you have kinds of depiction of sexual violence as a deterrent against enemy. This is not something far away. This is happening today. And therefore, we have to engage and to commit to the highest standard and with all our possibilities and all the resources that you can avail of. But thinking, dreaming of a violence-free society and a violence-free church is naive, or it is very dangerous.
Maybe instead of hoping that we can eliminate abuse altogether, maybe it makes more sense to relook at how we see hope. Theological hope is not optimism or seeing the future with rose-colored glasses. Hope is not attaining perfection here on earth. Hope is about trusting in God and in His promises, despite our sins and despite the darkness. Hope doesn't look away from darkness. Hope knows that with God, we can stand to look at reality for what it is. Ironically, though, those who speak most honestly about the church's darkest wounds are often seen as disloyal or lacking faith. But the opposite is true. You don't spend your life addressing painful, buried truths in the church unless you believe in your bones that the truth matters and that grace is real. Staring into the abyss of sin within the church can test your faith. It can stretch it to its breaking point. But this is also where faith reveals its strength, not in avoiding the darkness of suffering, but in walking into it, trusting that God is already there. Moving to our diocese, I felt hopeful. It was really exciting that we had found a bishop so quickly. But at the back of my mind, something didn't let me settle. I felt an unease.
I think we knew that even though we wanted this to be our forever home, and it felt like such a good fit in some ways, there was also a sense of detachment to do whatever God asked of us before we cling to anything else.
Yeah, I think that's just true of our charism in general. Like, we always have to be free to detach ourselves from safety and security to follow him. And so even though we had just found a new diocese, we had made our vows, we were finding a home, I just could sense that God was asking me to detach myself from everything that he had just given me.
I think we had seen time and time again that it was actually reputation and protection of those institutional things, those securities that allowed someone to step away from really being in solidarity with the survivors.
Just as Sister Danielle Victoria and I had settled into a new home, we decided to reach out to our former community and ask if they had heard from the Vatican about the second case. Part of us wanted to just leave it. We were beginning a new mission. Why endanger all that we had just gained? Why would we risk that? But then again, we asked ourselves, how could we not risk that if people are in danger? This audio documentary is the first major step in the mission of the Sisters of the Little Way of Beauty, Truth, and Goodness, a mission of listening and solidarity with people on the fringes of the Church, especially those who have been wounded, abused, or scandalized by members of the Church. If you would like to support our mission and projects like this, please visit sistersofthelittleway.com.
I know it's hard to see a God within this filthy corpus, stained by sins of men, called to lay their lives before us. Their skulls, they line this road, haunted by an ancient chorus. This is my body, this is my body.